On this Monday night, Russia's revenge. Rockets rain down on Ukraine after the bombing of a key bridge. The despair, the devastation, and the reaction from around the world. Fiona's consequences for a critical industry.
Oh, that's something we've never seen before.
The fishing sector's unprecedented challenges. The high cost of being treated for cancer in Canada.
I would have to jump through all of these hoops, and that's just not fair.
The inequity in access to potentially life-saving medication and that fighting spirit.
They never even thought that it was possible.
The BC wrestler redefining the competition.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Neetu Garcha.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Russia has launched its broadest attack on Ukraine since the start of the war. At least 14 people were killed and 97 injured. A flurry of deadly missile strikes targeted bridges and residential high-rises in at least 11 cities across the country, including the capital. The nation's energy system has been crippled, with 5 regions completely in the dark. Russian President Putin says the assault is revenge for a deadly blast over the weekend on a key bridge linking Russia and Crimea. Our Europe Bureau Chief Goomansingh reports on the intense shelling and what some Ukrainians are calling another Putin miscalculation, and a warning some of the images may be disturbing.
Monday morning horrors. Missile strikes launched by Russia rained down in a barrage of attacks across Ukraine. The popular footbridge wasn't directly hit, but there were many other strikes in the capital with deadly results. In his nightly update, Ukraine's president urged citizens to listen to the air raid sirens, saying Russia can't win on the battlefield, and so they resort to terror.
They want to destroy our people, our infrastructure, everything. I really don't know, and I'm extremely angry.
The strikes come after a section of the Kerch Bridge was bombed Saturday. Ukraine has not taken responsibility. The bridge connects Russia with Crimea. It was built after the illegal annexation of the Ukrainian peninsula and was a pet project of Vladimir Putin's. If Russia intended to strike fear into the hearts of Ukrainians with Monday's attacks, it appears to have instead hardened their resolve. People sheltering in metro stations didn't cower, but crooned.
What I'm seeing now is that people just, rallying around the idea that these attacks they're brutal, but they're nonsensical, they're useless from the military standpoint.
11 heating and power stations in 8 regions of the country were damaged. Ukraine has been forced to halt energy exports, and some cities will experience rolling blackouts until repairs are made. The Ukrainian president said Russia fired 84 cruise missiles. Ukraine managed to intercept 43 of them. An additional 24 Russian drones were also deployed, 13 destroyed by Ukrainian forces. Belarus, meanwhile, is now actively participating with Russia. President Alexander Lukashenko ordered troops to deploy with Russian forces near Ukraine, saying Kyiv and its Western backers pose a threat to his country. But he did not elaborate. Goomansingh, Global News, London.
Putin's retaliation for Saturday's bombing was widely feared. The European Union calls it a war crime. Prime Minister Trudeau says Russia must be held accountable, and today he spoke to the president of Ukraine. Trudeau expressed his condolences for Russia's attacks and says Canada will support Ukraine as long as necessary. As Redmond Shannon reports, the brutal escalation has triggered widespread condemnation from Ukraine's Western allies.
As soon as the first missiles landed, there was little doubt that Russia's airstrikes were in response to Saturday's Kerch Bridge explosion. Vladimir Putin confirmed his motives in a meeting with his Security Council.
It is simply impossible to leave crimes of this kind unanswered. If attempts to carry out acts of terrorism on our territory continue, Russia's response will be harsh.
Ahead of Tuesday's emergency GN summit, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau called the attacks reprehensible, pledging continued military assistance. And US President Joe Biden said America would support Ukraine for as long as it takes.
What we have to do is definitely deliver air defense from the Allies' side so that the Ukrainians can protect their cities, their civilians.
Peering across the border to Russia, Estonia's Prime Minister met with the head of the European Commission Monday.
Russia once again has shown to the world what it stands for. It is terror and brutality. Those who are responsible have to be held accountable.
But European solidarity is not total. EU member Hungary announcing it will help Russia-friendly Serbia by building a pipeline to bypass sanctions. Asian giants China and India say they hope for a de-escalation in Ukraine soon. Delhi's Foreign Minister coy on this week's UN vote to condemn Russia's illegal annexation in Ukraine.
As a matter of prudence and policy, we don't predict our votes in advance.
Last month, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi openly told Putin today is not an era of war. Perhaps a rising sign of impatience from India, despite its reliance on Moscow for oil and arms. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
In Iran, protests over the death of Mahsa Amini have reached the country's key oil industry. Videos posted to social media appear to show workers at a major petrochemical plant carrying out a threat to strike. It's the first sign the unrest has reached the nation's most crucial sector. The demonstration is in solidarity with a nationwide movement. It was sparked by the death of 22-year-old Amini. She was in the custody of Iran's so-called morality police, accused of improperly wearing her hijab. This morning, the sound of apparent gunshots and explosions echoed through the capital of Iran's Kurdistan province. Amini was Kurdish, and her death has been felt strongly in the region, where demonstrations began at her funeral on September 17th. At least 185 people have died in the crackdowns on anti-government protests, according to a Norway-based human rights group. Canada Sport Minister Pascal Saint-Onge says the weekend decision by the interim chair of Hockey Canada, Andrea Skinner, to resign is a step in the right direction. But as David Aiken reports, she and many others say much more still needs to be done to change hockey culture in Canada.
Fans of professional hockey are looking forward to the marquee matchups this week that will open the NHL season. But hockey fans are also keen to see the sport's governing body in Canada make more changes more quickly.
It isn't happening fast enough.
Liberal MP Chris Biddle and MPs from all parties have been unanimous. Meaningful change does not mean just switching out board members. It means changing management.
It would be good to see others. I think more important, the senior leadership of Hockey Canada needs to step down.
Sport Minister Pascal Saint-Onge issued a statement late Sunday saying the departure of Hockey Canada's interim board chair Andrea Skinner was a step in the right direction. It must now be followed, she continued, by a process of meaningful change in Hockey Canada's values and culture. We hope that the remaining members work actively toward the transition to a new leadership and governance team. A former Hockey Canada chair agrees.
There's been no accountability, and the board is not holding the people accountable for the decisions that are being made.
In the meantime, the list of sponsors withdrawing their support has lengthened. The latest to pull away, Nike. It was one of 4 Hockey Canada premier partners, along with Imperial Oil, TELUS, and Tim Hortons. All have now paused or ended their relationship with Hockey Canada.
Hockey Canada can get back if it makes the right moves, if it hires the right people, and is honest about what has happened and what needs to be done. Companies will come back.
Provincial associations have also withheld funds. Hockey Newfoundland and Labrador became the latest to do so over the weekend, joining Hockey Ontario, Hockey Quebec, and others. But so far, Hockey Alberta and Hockey BC have not withheld funding, though some have called on them to do so.
BC Hockey can, I think, play a key role if they step up now and decide to follow where the other provincial federations have headed.
Hockey Alberta said Friday it may yet withhold funds, but first it too wants answers and action from Hockey Canada. David Aiken, Global News, Ottawa.
People living in Atlantic Canada and eastern Quebec are still taking stock more than 2 weeks after a monster storm devastated their communities. Post-tropical storm Fiona destroyed homes and knocked out power to much of the region. Crews are still working to restore electricity in parts of PEI and Nova Scotia. Fiona also damaged a critically important industry on the East Coast. Ross Lord has more on the impacts to the fishing sector.
The harbour at Bird Islands, Newfoundland, is one of almost 100 in Atlantic Canada that were damaged by Fiona. Fishing sheds and other structures that stood up to nature for generations absorbed into the ocean by an immense storm surge.
And harvesters have their fishing gear in them, lobster traps. Harvesters have all these tools and related items that they use for their work in these buildings. And the storm surge and the waves came in and just took several of the harbors, just took everything.
More than a dozen wharves on the East Coast were destroyed. Many others were damaged, and millions of dollars worth of fishing traps and other equipment was lost. Losses that are largely uninsured.
Oh, that's something we've never seen before.
Harvesters are looking at the $300 million recovery fund announced by the Prime Minister last week to help them rebuild. But the storm is forcing people who've never doubted their life's work to think twice about their uneasy alliance with the ocean.
I think the perspective on not only where we live and what we do, but who we are has kind of changed after this storm.
Reinforcing fears about the impact of climate change and moving preventative measures to the forefront.
These sheds and stuff have been there for 100 years. And, but they'll learn, there's no doubt about that. People are going to be building higher.
With supply chains backed up and replacement material more expensive than ever, the economic rebuild from Fiona's devastation will take a while. Ross Lord, Global News.
The countdown is on to a critical vote in the U.S. Coming up, what's making next month's midterm elections so unpredictable? Plus, laid to rest, funerals begin for the victims of the Thailand daycare rampage. In the U.S., voters are less than a month away from heading to the polls for crucial midterm elections. Republicans had thought they could regain control of Congress. Instead, many races are too close to call, and even pollsters are unsure who will control the balance of power after November 8th. As Jackson Prosco reports, both parties are rushing to shore up support with very different messages.
As control of Congress hangs in the balance, a man who's not on the ballot could decide which party wins both the House and Senate.
Republicans are saying that their vote in November is going to reflect more of what they think about President Trump, and Democrats are saying exactly the same thing.
We're going to take back America.
Former President Donald Trump has put himself front and center in the midterms, turning what's typically a referendum on the incumbent president and party into another election all about Trump.
It's looking like a lot of Americans are really tired of Donald Trump's lies about the 2020 election and aren't going to be too keen to vote for some of those people in November.
Trump has backed dozens of so-called election deniers and is looking back, not forward. But many of those candidates are turning out to be a problem for Republicans. In Georgia, the Trump-backed candidate for Senate, Herschel Walker, is embroiled in controversy. Strictly anti-abortion, Walker faces allegations he paid for an abortion for an ex-girlfriend.
The abortion thing is false. It's a lie.
Trump's picks in other key states are in trouble, too. All while Democrats see an uptick in voter registration, fueled by the Supreme Court decision on abortion, and the popularity of President Biden's policies like student debt forgiveness.
If Republicans take control of the Congress, these historic victories we just won for the American people are going to be taken away.
In this unusual and unpredictable election year, pollsters are increasingly reluctant to make predictions. Less than 1 month from Election Day, it's clear many races and the balance of power will come down to the wire. Jackson Prosco, Global News, Washington.
A Canadian parliamentary delegation traveled to Taiwan this weekend to show support for the island, despite the tension stirred up with China after U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's trip there in August. As part of their tour, the 5 members, led by Toronto MP Judy Sgro, attended Taiwan's National Day celebrations. When asked about the significance of the visit earlier, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said China's position on Taiwanese independence is troubling. China considers Taiwan to be a part of its territory and responded to Pelosi's visit with a series of provocative military drills in the strait. Funerals are now underway for the 36 victims, mostly children, killed in a massacre at a daycare facility in northern Thailand. Buddhist monks led the ceremonies as grieving parents said goodbye to their kids. The attacker also killed his wife and son before ending his own life. Officials say he had recently been fired from his job as a police officer after he was caught with methamphetamines. Thailand's prime minister has responded to the attacks by ordering a strict clampdown on drugs and drug dealers, as well as tightening gun control rules. Ahead, the age gap in cancer treatment, why some young Canadians face huge hurdles accessing life-saving medications. When a young Canadian is diagnosed with cancer, the cost of treatment should be the last thing on their mind. But when it comes to accessing life-saving drugs in Canada, it turns out age does matter. Because there's no national drug insurance plan, those without private coverage are at the mercy of provincial rules. And as Jamie Morocker explains, the disparity can put patients in expensive life-or-death situations.
32-year-old Rebecca Grundy is beating the odds.
It's almost 4 years to the day where I woke up on a stretcher in a hospital hallway after suffering from 3 grand mal seizures.
The cause? A grade 4 glioblastoma, an extremely aggressive form of brain cancer with one of the lowest survival rates, typically less than 18 months. It's most commonly seen in adults over the age of 45. Grundy was just 28 when she found out about her tumor, and in Ontario, the drug she needed to survive, an at-home treatment called temozolomide, isn't covered for patients her age.
I would have to jump through all of these hoops as a young person under the age of 65 to get access to this treatment that is supposed to kill the cancer cells and save my life. And that's just not fair.
Grundy spent weeks waiting for provincial assistance, time many of these patients don't have.
That's the most devastating situation, when the most effective, the most convenient, the best tolerated treatment just no longer becomes an option, and we have to use an inferior treatment with more toxicities.
In Atlantic provinces, patients face a similar patchwork of drug coverage. Meanwhile, in Quebec, private or public insurance will cover the cost. And in Canada's western provinces, take-home cancer drugs and hospital-administered cancer drugs are treated equally. This means most patients get the medication doctors prescribe them immediately. But even that access comes with caveats. 36-year-old Megan Goet was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer last year. She was prescribed Lynparza, another at-home medication with less severe side effects. But in Alberta, the $8,500 a month cost is only covered for ovarian and prostate cancers. Without her husband's private insurance, the mother of one says she likely wouldn't be alive today.
I was really scared that I wasn't going to be able to see him graduate kindergarten thanks to this drug, and how amazing it is working for me. It has extended my longevity by quite a bit.
At Ontario's legislature, there have been promises of policy change, but no immediate action.
We're frustrated. We had hoped that our cancer care system would have evolved and tried to keep pace with how cancer treatment is changing.
Advocates say this should also include speedier approvals from Health Canada, keeping pace with developments south of the border.
During the pandemic, we were seeing young people with aggressive breast cancer crossing the U.S. border to try to access treatment because the stakes are so high.
Grundy, a lobbyist, is focusing on her province, pushing Ontario's health ministry to do better for other patients.
It's important that these people have the best shot at life.
Fighting not just for her own, but for everyone else who will need treatment, regardless of age. Jamie Morocker, Global News, Toronto.
Inspiring fight. Next, how the comeback story of a jiu-jitsu competitor in BC is creating a buzz in the martial arts world. Finally tonight, an incredible comeback by a jiu-jitsu competitor in BC, proving not even the bullets that knocked him down in a 2017 shooting could kill his passion for the sport. Kamil Kermali has the inspiring story.
This isn't just an ordinary fight. It's something never seen here before, not just at this BC Jiu-Jitsu tournament, but across the province. Leo Samarelli paralyzed from the waist down, competing against able-bodied fighters and holding his own.
They never seen anything like that, or they never even thought that it was possible.
It was his dream for years, but it was only this past summer Samarelli met the person who would help get him there.
So I put my hook in.
His coach, Migo Ward Yasin.
I wouldn't say it was difficult, it was challenging. I needed to be creative.
But Samarelli's story goes back even further. A boxer on his way to turning pro in 2017, he was shot 4 times. Police called it a case of mistaken identity. But he pushed on. Without the use of his legs, he climbed the grouse grind on his hands and started a not-for-profit allowing boxers with disabilities to compete. Now creating new strategies to compete against able-bodied fighters. What are you looking at
Again,
right here?
I'm gonna be looking for this.
Okay, so you're looking
either for an arm, I'm gonna be looking for a leg, I'm gonna be looking for a double leg, or if you're even in there, reaching in there, and depending how, I'm gonna be even going up for here.
Okay, so you're looking to pull me into you. His first tournament handed him 2 losses, but still considered a success.
I felt I made like a difference, and that I think is the most, that's the biggest victory I came away from that day.
The crowd inspired, giving Leo a standing ovation.
We all got emotional. I'm still getting choked right now thinking about it.
Now the next step to notch a historic win.
It's rare to find some guys out there like me that out there, but there are people out there.
In hopes more fighters with disabilities find the courage to roll on to the mat. Kamil Kermali, Global News.
Just remarkable. That is Global National for this Monday night. I'm Neetu Garcha. Tonight's Your Canada is the night sky in Valemount, BC. Thanks for watching. Donna will be back at the anchor desk tomorrow. Have a great night.